Ever think about what your robot vacuum is actually seeing as it scoots around your house? I mean, it's probably more than just like dust bunnies,
Yeah.
right? And that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today in our deep dive on robot vacuums and data privacy.
That's a really interesting question, especially now that we're seeing so many of these vacuums with cameras.
Yeah, cameras. It's not something you typically think of when you think of a vacuum cleaner.
So before we even get to the privacy stuff, can you maybe just explain why these cameras are becoming so popular?
Well, they aren't just for like spying on your pets when you're not home, although I'm sure some people do use them for that. But the main reason is actually that the cameras help with navigation. Like they can create these really detailed maps of your house, and they can avoid obstacles, like furniture or toys or whatever. And some can even respond to voice commands if they're connected to like a smart home system. But this actually isn't really a new thing. Some of the more like high-end models have actually been using cameras for like 5 years now. Okay, so it's not all about invading privacy. But there have been some, pretty unsettling stories lately, like that whole thing with the robot vacuum snapping pictures of someone on the toilet.
Oh yeah, the infamous toilet photo incident. It definitely got people's attention, and for good reason. It involved a prototype of the Roomba J7, and it was sending data back to iRobot so they could improve the algorithms. Which isn't unusual in itself. Companies often need what they call annotated images to train their AI. So it's basically pictures where objects are labeled so the AI can recognize them.
So it's kind of like teaching the vacuum to tell the difference between like a shoe and a sock, or in this case, something you definitely wouldn't want your vacuum to see, let alone take a picture of.
Yeah, exactly. But this is where it gets a little weird. iRobot, like a lot of tech companies, actually outsources some of this data annotation to third-party companies. And in this case, the company was called Scale AI.
And I'm guessing Scale AI had some employees who, shall we say, didn't really get the privacy thing.
Let's just say that some of those employees thought certain pictures were funny enough to share with people outside the company. And that's how those pictures ended up in the news.
Wow. That's concerning, to say the least. But even if we forget about that whole incident for a minute, what kind of data could our robot vacuums be collecting day to day? I mean, they're constantly moving all around our homes, mapping every inch of the place.
You're right to be concerned. It's not just maps they're creating. They learn your cleaning schedules, figure out the layout of your home, and they could potentially even be capturing pictures or audio if they have those features. And even though companies often use terms like diagnostic data to describe what they collect, their privacy policies can be super vague.
So we might not even actually know everything they're gathering and how they're using it.
Exactly. That's one of the biggest problems. There's just not enough transparency. And when you combine that with the fact that these devices are constantly collecting data in our homes where we expect privacy, it raises some serious red flags.
Okay, so it's not just about the manufacturer then. There are other potential risks too.
For sure. Data breaches are a big concern. This data, even if it seems harmless, could be valuable to hackers. And in a worst-case scenario, it could even be misused by employees at the company itself.
Yeah, and it's not super likely, but we can't really rule out the possibility of the vacuum itself being hacked and used to spy on people.
Oh, great. That sounds like something out of a movie, but, with everything being connected these days, it's a risk we got to think about. Okay, I'm starting to freak out a little bit here, but before we all just chuck our robot vacuums in the trash, let's talk about what we can do to protect our privacy.
Good point. It's easy to get caught up in all the what-ifs, but remember, we're not totally helpless. There are things you can do to minimize those risks.
So, where do we even start?
Well, the first thing is to pick a manufacturer that has a good reputation when it comes to privacy and security. Like, do your research, read reviews, and look for companies that are upfront about how they collect data.
And once you actually have the vacuum, what then? Do we just hope for the best? No, not at all. You have way more control over your robot vacuum's data collection than you might think. A lot of models give you the option to turn off data sharing features, like sending maps of your home back to the company. And if there are places you absolutely don't want the vacuum to go, like maybe your office or, the bathroom after that toilet photo incident, you can usually block those areas off using virtual walls or the app settings.
So I can tell my robot vacuum to stay out of my business.
Exactly. It's all about setting boundaries and using those privacy controls.
That makes me feel a little better. But what about those of us who want to go completely off the grid? Is it even possible to get a robot vacuum that works totally offline?
It is, but it might take some digging. Not all companies make a big deal about offline functionality. You might have to look at user reviews or forums or even call the company support line to find out for sure.
Okay, let's say I find one that says it works offline. What's the catch?
Usually it just means you have to do the initial setup with the app connected to the internet just once, and then you can disconnect it. Some models let you set cleaning schedules and stuff like that without being online all the time.
So it's like a hybrid thing. You get it going with the internet's help,
Yeah.
and then you can let it do its thing without sending data back to headquarters.
Exactly. It's a good compromise for a lot of people, but then there are some people who are really tech savvy and want even more control over their data.
Yeah, like people who are comfortable messing with their home network and setting things up manually.
You're talking about setting up the vacuum on your local network, completely bypassing the company's servers. It's definitely possible, but it's more for advanced users.
So there's a whole range of options from choosing a privacy-focused company to going totally offline.
Yep. And the best option for you depends on how concerned you are your technical skills and how much convenience you're willing to give up for privacy.
Sounds like there's no one right answer.
Exactly. The important thing is that you have choices. Don't just accept the default settings. Take some time to understand the risks, look into the different options, and make a choice that works for you and your privacy preferences.
It's about finding that balance between convenience and peace of mind.
Right. And like we've been talking about, there are ways to have both. You don't have to pick one or the other.
Well said. Now, earlier we mentioned the Mozilla Foundation's Privacy Not Included guide. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
It's a great resource for anyone thinking about getting a robot vacuum or any other smart home device for that matter. They've done a really good job of looking at different models and rating them based on their privacy practices. They look at stuff like their data collection policies, security measures, and how transparent the companies are about how they use data. Definitely worth checking out before you buy anything.
So it's kind of like Consumer Reports, but for privacy.
Good analogy. It gives you the info you need to make a smart choice about which products fit with your privacy values.
And we'll be sure to include a link to that guide in the show notes for our listeners.
Great idea. The more you know, the better you can protect your privacy.
I totally agree. So to wrap things up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I'd say it's this. The technology behind robot vacuums is constantly changing. That means new features, new capabilities, and new privacy concerns are always popping up. So stay informed, do your research, ask questions, and don't be afraid to tweak your settings or even switch products if your privacy needs change.
Yeah, it really is a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah.
Weighing the convenience of all these gadgets against the potential privacy risks.
It is. And that whole toilet photo thing, as crazy as it was, I think it was a wake-up call for a lot of people. It made us realize that these devices, even the ones that seem totally normal, like vacuum cleaners, they're collecting way more data than we think.
It definitely made people question whether our homes are really as private as we thought.
For sure. And this technology, it's only going to get more advanced, more integrated into our lives. So it's more important now than ever to be aware of the risks and, actually do something to protect our privacy.
It's funny because we always hear about data privacy when it comes to like online stuff, what we post on social media, the websites we visit, all that. But with all these smart home devices, that line is getting blurrier and blurrier.
Exactly. Our homes are basically becoming part of the digital world, so we need to start thinking about data privacy in a whole new way.
So it's not just about being careful what we share online. It's also about thinking about the devices we bring into our homes and what data they're collecting.
Exactly. It's about taking control of our digital footprint in our homes and online.
Which brings us back to what we were saying about doing research, asking questions, and picking products that match our privacy values.
Couldn't agree more. It's up to us as consumers to be informed and make good choices about the tech we bring into our lives.
Well said. So for everyone listening out there, we hope this deep dive has helped you understand the privacy issues around robot vacuums a bit better. It's complicated and there's no easy answer. But just by being aware of the risks and taking some basic steps, you can have a robot vacuum and still keep your privacy.
And don't forget, technology's always changing. So stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Your privacy is worth it.
Thanks for joining us today. Until next time, stay safe and stay in control of your data.